Ever feel like the world is this, like, giant game of chess, and no one bothered to tell you the rules? Yeah, that's kind of what geopolitics can feel like, right? But what if I told you there are rules? Or at least strategies, like these tactics that have been around for centuries. That's what we're diving into today. These surprisingly enduring tactics of global power plays. And to guide us, we're going straight to the source. Pedro Baños, así se domina el mundo, or for us English speakers, this is how the world is dominated. So we're going to uncover some seriously fascinating stuff today, maybe a little unsettling too, if we're being honest, about how influence, like real influence, works on a global scale. And don't worry, this isn't just for, diplomats and politicians. This is about you, about connecting those seemingly distant events to your own life, becoming a more informed citizen of the world. And Baños, he kicks things off with a really interesting analogy. He asks us to imagine the world as a giant schoolyard.
And before you dismiss it, like it's too simplistic, just think about it for a second. You got your different groups, right? The bullies, always pushing their weight around. The followers hoping to, gain something that's down with the strong. Those who isolate themselves by choice or by circumstance. And then you've got those who try to carve their own path, navigating the complexities of the schoolyard.
Right.
With a mix of cunning and resilience.
It's such a vivid image. It instantly makes those abstract ideas about international relations feel a bit more, well, real. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Baños argues that in this global schoolyard, hypocrisy isn't a bug in the system. It's practically a feature.
Exactly. And that's because states, for all their talk about, values and principles, they're ultimately driven by self-interest.
Mm-hmm.
And what's important to understand is that those interests, they can shift dramatically over time. Alliances change. Yesterday's enemy becomes today's strategic partner, and vice versa. And in this constant, jockeying for power, for advantage, ethical considerations, well, they often take a back seat. And, these power dynamics, these shifting alliances, they aren't just a product of, like recent history. Baños argues that to really understand them, we need to take a long view, examine the patterns that have been playing out for centuries. Because not saying history repeats itself exactly, but he highlights how geography and resources, those constants in a changing world, they shape the course of empires.
It's almost like those factors, they set the stage, right? And then the players come and go, acting out variations on the same themes.
Exactly. He uses the Punic Wars as a prime example.
Yeah.
This was a clash between Rome and Carthage, two rising powers vying for dominance in the Mediterranean.
Right.
Now, you might think this was about, clashing ideologies.
Right.
Or personalities.
Right.
But at its core, it was about something far more tangible. Economics.
Okay, so unpack that for us. How do a couple of ancient empires connect to the global power plays of today?
Well, Rome's merchants, the backbone of their, growing empire, they saw Carthage as a direct threat, a competitor for vital trade routes and resources. Carthage controlled access to fertile land and lucrative trade networks, and Rome wanted a piece of the action. Actually, they wanted the whole pie.
So it was a classic power grab, but on a global scale.
Precisely. And Baños argues that this dynamic, this struggle for control over strategically important regions, it's played out time and again throughout history.
Yeah.
He points to places like Afghanistan, a crossroads between Asia and the Middle East, which has been a focal point of conflict for centuries.
It's fascinating how a country's geography can make it such a strategic prize, even after all these years.
Absolutely. And we can see a similar pattern. With Russia. For centuries, they've been driven by this desire to secure access to the Black Sea, a vital waterway for trade and projection of power. In fact, understanding that long history is crucial for understanding the current conflict in Ukraine.
It's like those historical echoes are still shaping the events of today. But Baños takes it a step further, arguing that economics don't just influence global power plays, they often drive them.
He's not afraid to challenge conventional wisdom, is he?
He really isn't. And to illustrate his point, he brings up this, shocking example. Turns out Texaco, the oil giant, they were supplying oil to Franco's forces during the Spanish Civil War.
Yeah, and it wasn't just a case of, opportunistic profiteering either. Texaco actively undermined the efforts of countries that supported the democratically elected government, all to secure a monopoly on Spain's oil market.
It really makes you question the narratives we're often given, doesn't it? Like, sometimes the economic realities are playing out on a whole other level.
Absolutely. And this isn't just a, relic of the past. Today, we see similar dynamics at play with some European countries that champion human rights on the world stage. Right.
Right, but then they turn around
They
and
turn around.
they become major arms suppliers to regimes with, shall we say, questionable human rights records.
Exactly. It shows how economic interests, particularly in like strategically important industries, they often speak louder than political rhetoric.
It's almost like money is speaking a secret language, one that shapes the world behind the scenes. Baños even uses the term economic warfare to describe how nations use things like currency manipulation, strategic investments, even sanctions as weapons to cripple their opponents without firing a shot.
And a prime example of this, like economic maneuvering, is China's Belt and Road Initiative.
Ah, yes. The trillion-dollar project everyone's talking about.
Right, but it's not just about, building roads and bridges. It's a strategic chess move designed to reshape global trade routes and expand China's influence on a massive scale. They're playing a long game,
Right.
using their economic might to position themselves for dominance in the 21st century.
It's fascinating and a little intimidating, to be honest.
It certainly gives you a new perspective on global power, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's not just about military strength anymore. It's about controlling the flow of resources, technology, and wealth.
And Baños, he leaves us with this, almost unsettling thought. He argues that the real power players of the future, they'll be the ones who control vital resources. And we're not just talking about oil or natural gas. He specifically calls out things like electricity. In a world grappling with climate change and the transition to renewable energy sources, this control, it takes on a whole new dimension.
It really does. Think about it. Who will control the technologies that harness solar, wind, even nuclear power? The raw materials needed for these technologies, those who hold the keys to the energy grid, whether it's, fueled by electrons or barrels of oil, they'll have immense leverage in the coming decades.
It's like a whole new game is unfolding. And the rules, well, the rules are still being written. So as you go about your day, just remember those timeless tactics we've uncovered. Look for the schoolyard dynamics, the echoes of history, and the hidden language of economics at play in the news. Because the more aware we are of these forces, the better equipped we'll be to navigate this complex and ever-changing world.